And Jimmy Kimmel, he's very mad at me, and I know you're close to him.
I've heard of
I
that.
hope you tell him that, I'm sorry that, they got bent out of shape. I don't think I did anything wrong. We can have disagreements.
I agree.
I mean, you and I don't agree on everything. Look at this clash now. And yet we're cool. Sometimes I am a little brash about me when they compare me with the other late night guys. And I'm like, I'm not like you guys. I'm not. You could all exchange your monologues, all of you, and no one would know the difference in tone. Okay?
Tone, yeah.
Whereas me, I'm not there. I'm not in on your, I don't just buy into the left wing, and I never stop making fun of the right wing.
It's almost like Bill Maher walked into the late-night comedy world, looked around to familiar faces, and decided he wasn't going to follow the same script as everyone else. He's not acting heartbroken about it either. When it comes to tension with Jimmy Kimmel, Maher's attitude feels more like he's upset, and that's his choice, but I didn't betray anyone. It's awkward, sure, but it's also honest. And in today's media climate, that kind of open disagreement almost feels out of place. Underneath the jokes, Maher is making a broader point about modern late-night comedy. He's arguing that much of it now runs on a single track. The tone sounds similar. The targets are predictable. The punchlines land in the same places, followed by the same applause. If you swap monologues between several hosts who share the same political leanings, would most viewers even notice? If you played 3 clips back-to-back without names attached, could people clearly tell who was speaking? That's the question he's raising, not as an attack, but as a challenge to the sameness he sees. Maher's brand has always been a mix of irritation, confidence, and a belief that he's willing to say what others won't. He makes fun of conservatives regularly. That hasn't changed. But he also refuses to treat liberals as flawless. His stance is simple. Both sides are blind spots, and both deserve criticism. For him, comedy loses its edge the moment it protects one team while constantly hammering the other. And that's where the real tension starts. In tight media circles, there's often an unspoken understanding about who gets targeted and who gets defended. Once someone breaks that pattern, it can strain friendships. When you stop following the shared script, you don't just stand out, you disrupt the rhythm. Whether people agree with him or not, Maher's move isn't really about one disagreement. It's about pushing back against a comedy culture that, in his view, has become too uniform and too predictable.
Sometimes I am a little brash about me when they compare me with the other late night guys. And I'm like, I'm not like you guys. I'm not. You could all exchange your monologues, all of you, and no one would know the difference in tone. Okay?
Tone, yeah.
Whereas me, I'm not there. I'm not in on your, I don't just buy into the left wing, and I never stop making fun of the right wing.
This is where the tension with Jimmy Kimmel really comes into focus. Bill Maher says Kimmel is upset with him, and instead of issuing some dramatic apology, Maher delivers a very comedian-style response. Tell Jimmy I'm sorry you got bent out of shape. It's not, I regret what I said. It's more like, I'm sorry you didn't like hearing it. That's classic stand-up energy. Blunt, a little sharp, but not pretending to back down. But then Maher says something that matters more than the joke. He points out that people can disagree and still be fine with each other. You don't have to agree on every issue to stay friends. That idea sounds simple, almost obvious, yet it feels rare right now. In today's climate, a single disagreement can turn into a full character judgment. It's no longer, we see this differently. It becomes, you must be a bad person. That shift is what Maher seems most frustrated by. What bothers him even more is that the people reacting this way are often on his own side politically. He identifies with the left, but he looks around and wonders why open conversation feels unwelcome. He argues that debate used to be normal, even healthy. Now it can feel like stepping into a minefield. Say one thing that challenges a group, and suddenly you're treated like you switch teams. He even points out that when conservatives come on a show, they usually sit through tough questions and sharp jokes without walking off or demanding an apology to her. He mentioned John Kennedy as an example. Someone who took the criticism, pushed back, and still managed to end the conversation on decent terms. They disagreed strongly, but they didn't treat each other like enemies. That's the core of Maher's argument. It's not about siding with one party or the other. It's about keeping the space for disagreement open, being able to argue, laugh, push back, and then walk away without turning it into a personal war. For him, that ability to clash and still coexist is what's disappearing, and that's what he finds most concerning.
Bugs me so much. My tribe is supposed to be the left, but these are the people who just can't talk to you unless you're exactly there. Whereas the Republicans, they always come to my show. John Kennedy from Louisiana was on last week.
Yes,
took his beating like a man, like they all do. And we came across lovingly and smilingly and happily, and we can disagree.
I agree.
You and I aren't always completely on the same page, although we're very close because we're both smart guys. But, I just don't get that.
You can argue about the details all day long. You can debate whether Republicans or Democrats handle criticism better. You can say it depends on the guest, the host, the audience, or the moment. That's fair. But the bigger issue Bill Maher is pointing to is harder to dismiss. In many mainstream left-leaning spaces, disagreement no longer feels like a difference of opinion. It feels like contamination. If you're not fully aligned on every point, you're not just mistaken. You're labeled dangerous, irresponsible, or harmful. Words like unsafe and platforming harm get used quickly. And to be clear, yes, some ideas genuinely can be harmful. That's true. But Maher's frustration isn't about drawing lines around extreme views. It's about the speed of the reaction, the instant moral explosion, the refusal to even argue the point before declaring someone out of bounds. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. If your belief system falls apart the second someone challenges it, that's not confidence. Strong ideas should be able to handle pressure. They should survive tough questions, even rude ones. If they can't, then maybe they were never as solid as they felt inside the bubble. Maher argues that parts of the left have created echo chambers where the same ideas circulate without serious pushback. Inside those spaces, everything feels unified and righteous. There's a strong sense of belonging. Everyone speaks the same language. Everyone nods at the same moments. But when someone steps outside that script and questions it, the response often isn't debate, it's rejection. Instead of countering the argument, some choose to push the person out. That's why he keeps coming back to what sounds like a basic adult principle. Disagreement is not war. It's not betrayal. It's not proof that someone switched sides. It's normal. In a healthy democracy, disagreement is how ideas improve. It's how weak arguments get exposed and strong ones get refined. If people stop sparring and start shunning, the conversation doesn't get better. It just gets quieter and more predictable. And predictable conversations don't challenge anyone. They just repeat what everyone already believes.
And I never stop making fun of the right wing at all.
Right.
And if that's not good enough for you, then I think you're and I don't think Jimmy is an asshole.
No,
I think he's a great guy. And it bugs me that, because of what the latest thing was, that, we may never talk.
You guys should be thick as thieves and on the same page. And I'll tell you something interesting.
What makes this more layered is that Bill Maher doesn't actually want a scorched earth fallout with Jimmy Kimmel. He goes out of his way to say he doesn't think Kimmel is a bad person. In fact, he calls him a good guy. That detail matters. It's easy to criticize someone by turning them into a villain. It's hard to say, I respect you, but I think you're wrong. The internet rarely allows for that middle ground. Online culture often demands total loyalty or total rejection. If you disagree with someone publicly, you're expected to treat them like an enemy. Maher resists that. His position is more uncomfortable, but more human. He's basically saying, I like the guy, I just don't agree with him on everything. And he admits it would be sad if that disagreement ended the relationship. That's the part that hits deeper than the headline drama. It shows how fragile friendships can become when politics turns into a loyalty test. When ideology becomes a badge you have to wear at all times. Even small differences can feel like betrayal. Then he shifts to something even bigger than the Kimmel situation. He talks about what he calls the tastemakers, the influential voices who shape political conversation. He argues that on the right, you often see public infighting, Figures like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and Ben Shapiro have openly clashed with others in their own circle. They disagree loudly. They split. They argue in public. It's messy, but it's visible. Maher's claim is that on the left, the most prominent voices tend to stay more aligned. The messaging sounds similar. The tone matches. The approved opinions don't drift far from each other. Whether people agree with that assessment or not, his broader concern is about uniformity. When major voices move in sync, dissent inside the group becomes rarer and sometimes riskier. That's the explosive part of his argument. It's not just about one comedian being annoyed at another. It's about whether public debate within political camps is shrinking. When disagreement disappears inside a movement, the only arguments left are between sides. And when that happens, conversations get louder but not smarter.
Rubber stamp. I mean,
well, maybe
you can't tell me that Congress.
I don't mean Congress. I mean like amongst the tastemakers, your sort of Tucker Carlsons, your Candace Owens, your Ben Shapiro's.
You're right. They're all over the map.
They're all battling.
They're fighting each other.
Right. And on the left, everyone's sort of lockstep in terms of the tastemakers.
Right. Ben Shapiro, Yarmulke, Tucker Carlson, Hitler.
Right.
Not so bad.
Right. So, but all I'm saying is whether you agree or disagree, at least they're being honest.
Now, to be fair, the left absolutely has internal divisions. There are clear splits between progressives and moderates, insiders and outsiders, activists and party regulars. That debate is real. But Bill Maher isn't saying disagreements don't exist. His point is about something deeper, the social pressure around expressing those disagreements out loud. He argues that in many left-leaning spaces, people may privately question things, but publicly they hesitate, not because someone might argue back, but because the consequences can feel much bigger than a debate. The fear isn't just being wrong. It's being morally condemned. It's being isolated. It's being labeled in a way that sticks. When the cost of speaking up feels that high, people start self-censoring. And that's the part that should concern anyone, regardless of political side. When disagreement becomes taboo, what looks like unity can actually be compliance. It's not a room full of people who all independently reach the same conclusion. Sometimes it's a room full of people nodding because they don't want to be the next one called out. That kind of environment doesn't strengthen ideas. It protects them from being tested. Then Maher pivots to The View, which he clearly sees as an easy example. He points to what he views as inconsistency. When Jimmy Kimmel faced a brief suspension, many public figures rushed to defend him. Maher notes that the hosts of The View were quiet at first. Later, they pushed back against the idea that anyone could silence them. Maher's punchline was sharp. No one had to. You silence yourselves. It's a cutting line, but it ties back to his larger theme. His argument isn't just about one show or one host. It's about what happens when people pull back out of fear of saying the wrong thing. Whether you agree with him or not, he's raising a question about how much of today's public conversation is driven by conviction and how much is driven by caution.
It wasn't a good look for the woman party that all the guys were speaking out for Jimmy Kimmel when Trump went after him, except on the woman show, where for 5 days the outspoken hosts were suddenly as quiet as a geisha. Then on the 5th day, they rose and said, no one silences us. No one had to. You silenced yourself.
That line works because it isn't flashy. It's simple. It acts like a mirror. If you're a show like The View and you regularly talk about bravery, truth, and holding people accountable, viewers expect consistency. So when someone on your own side faces criticism and you go quiet for days, people notice, not because you weren't allowed to speak, but because you chose not to. And that choice sends a message. Bill Maher isn't arguing that they were censored. He's saying silence felt safer in that moment. And that's where the idea of selective outrage starts to hit. If your principles only show up when it's easy, they start to look less like principles and more like performance. If you're loud about accountability when it applies to others, but cautious when it applies to your own circle, the inconsistency stands out. Audiences are sensitive to that. Most people don't expect perfection. They understand that everyone has biases, but they do expect some level of fairness. When viewers sense that the outrage is selective, that it turns on and off depending on who's involved, trust erodes. And once trust fades, attention follows. People don't necessarily tune out because they switch political teams. They tune out because they feel like they're being lectured by someone who doesn't live by the same standards they demand from others. And nothing pushes an audience away faster than feeling preached at by someone who won't apply their own sermon evenly.
Whoopi Goldberg continued, did you all really think we weren't going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel? No, I thought you would, but then you didn't. Five days? Talk about needing extra time to get ready. And if you can't take a breath and laugh at that, you're making my point for me.
Bill Maher doesn't just focus on one feud. He zooms out and takes aim at late night as a whole. And honestly, this isn't even a shocking opinion anymore. For decades, late night was where people went to unwind. You get a light monologue about strange headlines, a fun celebrity interview, a silly sketch, maybe a band to close things out. It felt easy, familiar, like comfort food at the end of a long day. Now, a lot of viewers feel like the tone has shifted. Instead of light escape, it often feels like nightly political commentary aimed at the same audience, using the same villains and the same rhythm. The jokes land in predictable spots. The applause comes at familiar cues. The message is clear before the punchline even arrives. For people who already agree, it can feel validating. For others, it can feel repetitive. And that shift explains why some believe the genre has lost part of its magic. When every show starts to feel like a moral briefing wrapped in jokes, it stops feeling like simple entertainment. It can begin to feel like a lecture with a laugh track. That doesn't mean political comedy is new or wrong. It has always existed. But when it dominates every night with little variation in tone or target, the surprise disappears. And without surprise, comedy starts to feel less alive. Maher's broader point isn't that politics should vanish from comedy. It's that when every host delivers the same message in the same way, the genre shrinks. What used to feel diverse and unpredictable can start to feel uniform. And for an audience looking to relax at the end of the day, uniformity doesn't always feel fun.
No, it's just an upbeat party show. That's why they hired people named Joy and Sonny and Whoopi. Girls, let me go out strong, okay? It won't kill you. I promise. It's happened to me, and I may go out after this show. We don't know. We don't know. And, Jimmy, look, I don't think what he said was exactly right. I don't. We don't agree on that. He didn't lose his job for it.
Bill Maher makes it clear he's not trying to become a spokesman for the right. He's not praising Trump. He's not suddenly waving a new political flag. His argument is simpler than that. He believes that when the left turns comedy into straight political messaging, it weakens the comedy itself. Satire, in his view, is supposed to hit everywhere. It should challenge everyone at some point. It should create discomfort across the board. The moment satire becomes officially approved by one side, it stops feeling sharp. It starts feeling packaged, safe, predictable. And once it's predictable, it becomes less funny. When audiences know exactly who the target will be every single night, the edge disappears. Instead of surprise, you get confirmation. Instead of tension, you get applause on cue. Maher's warning is that once comedy becomes a product designed to protect one group and attack only another, it loses the risk that made it powerful in the first place. He also mocks something broader, the habit of turning everything into politics, even when it clearly isn't. He brings up a bizarre example involving strange online or virtual behavior, and makes the point that not every weird story needs a partisan spin. It's crude, it's exaggerated, it's classic Maher style. But underneath the jokes, there's a message. We've reached a moment where even the most random, absurd human behavior gets filtered through a political lens. That constant politicizing changes how people consume news and entertainment. A strange story can't just be strange anymore. It has to represent a side. It has to signal something about a broader ideological battle. Maher's concern is that when everything becomes political, nothing gets to simply exist as human, messy, or ridiculous. And when comedy has to pass through that filter every time, it stops feeling spontaneous and starts feeling forced.
fool's errand to try to say that these nuts who do these things are any team. Jimmy's wrong, I think, to put him in one team. But, look at what this guy is doing. I mean, Jimmy has every right to be wrong, but look at this guy. He was doing video games with furries. He was on a game called Furry Shades of Gay 3. This kid is in his basement with VR goggles on, getting virtually by a cartoon wombat? And you're going to put politics into this?
It also shows a core difference in philosophy between someone like Bill Maher and someone like Jimmy Kimmel. Kimmel has largely embraced the idea that late night is an extension of political commentary. Maher still treats it like a stage. And that distinction matters. When Maher pushes back on the karma narrative around Whoopi Goldberg and her suspension from view, he's not defending what she said. He's defending the principle that disagreement shouldn't automatically trigger punishment. His Pat Sajak selling a vowel joke works because it highlights the absurdity of punishing someone for doing the very thing the platform is built for, having opinions. It's tight. It's clean. It's classic late-night structure. Setup, twist, punch. And that's really his broader thesis. Comedy isn't supposed to function like HR. It's not a compliance department. It's not there to issue moral certifications. It's there to poke, exaggerate, and destabilize. Once comedians start calculating which jokes are approved by their tribe, the edge dulls. The danger fades. And without danger, satire becomes branding. Maher's frustration seems less about left versus right and more about vibe. He sees a shift from irreverence to alignment. From everyone is fair game to our enemies are fair game. That may win applause, but it narrows the comedic lens. If every punchline is predictable, if you can guess the villain before the joke lands, the surprise dies, and surprise is oxygen for comedy. The part about injecting politics into everything is key. When even absurd, apolitical stories get reframed as partisan allegories, humor starts to feel like a debate club with lighting cues. Maher's point isn't that politics shouldn't be joked about. It's that not everything has to be. When every anecdote becomes a morality play, the audience stops laughing and starts nodding or groaning. Either way, the spontaneity drains out, and his life is random riff cuts deeper than it sounds. The karma framing reflect a cultural urge to narrativize everything, to turn coincidence into cosmic justice. But comedy has always thrived on randomness, on the unfairness of reality, on the uncomfortable truth that sometimes bad things happen without a lesson attached. By rejecting the karma story, he's rejecting the neat moral arc people want. That's why his style still feels abrasive to some and refreshing to others. He's not offering comfort. He's offering friction. And whether you agree with him or not, friction is at least combustible. It sparks something. The real tension here isn't just between Maher and Kimmel. It's between two models of late night. One that sees itself as cultural therapy. One that sees itself as cultural provocation. Both have audiences. Both make money. But only one is trying to stay dangerous. And Maher's argument, love it or hate it, is that once comedy stops being dangerous, it stops being comedy and starts being messaging with a rim shot.
Stop saying that Whoopi Goldberg getting yanked from The View right after she attacked me on The View is karma. There's no such thing as karma. Sorry. Sorry, but life is random. The only word to describe it when a big game hunter gets trampled by an elephant and then eaten by lions is hilarious. Now, I mentioned this karma stuff on the show last week because I was relating how many texts and emails I got from people congratulating me on receiving a karmagram from the universe in the form of Whoopi Goldberg's chastisement.
At its core, Maher's point is simple and consistent. Debate ideas, criticize freely, roast, dismantle, but don't make silencing the default reaction. Once that becomes a go-to move, it doesn't just affect opponents. It ensnares friends, colleagues, and eventually yourself. It creates a culture where everyone walks on eggshells, terrified of being the next target. And that's exactly how Maher sees the current climate. In his view, the left is devouring itself with endless purity tests. Every statement, every joke, every opinion is scrutinized for ideological perfection. And the entertainment world? It's like the hall monitor in a school cafeteria, enforcing the rules. Step out of line, even slightly, and suddenly you're treated like a traitor, a team switcher, someone who doesn't belong. Maher's response is blunt but clear. No, I'm not switching teams. I'm just not joining the cult. He refuses to perform for approval or toe an invisible line. He's fine criticizing anyone, but he won't participate in the rigid, performative orthodoxy that treats every disagreement as betrayal. For him, the principle is about independence, about keeping comedy, conversation, and thought alive without letting fear dictate every move. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but that's the point. It's human and it's real.
Whoopi Goldberg shouldn't have to conform to or apologize for her views on race, as much as I disagree with them. And she certainly shouldn't have to sit out like a child and think about what she did. The View suspending someone for sharing a view is like firing Pat Sajak for selling a vowel.
You might not like his style. Maybe you think he's arrogant, out of touch, or complains too much about woke culture. That's fine. But the question he's raising is real and important. What happens to society when people can't disagree without trying to destroy each other? What happens when comedians stop just making jokes and start preaching with punchlines? When shows turn into sermons and audiences act like congregations, ready to punish anyone who steps out of line? Here's the thing. If you truly believe in your ideas, you should be able to defend them. You should be able to argue, debate, and even laugh at yourself sometimes. That's not weakness. It's confidence. Fragility is when your whole sense of self depends on no one ever challenging you. Fragility is living in a bubble where every outside opinion feels like a threat. And that's exactly what he's pointing out. A lot of modern conversation is fragile, and it's killing the energy in public debate. When he says he can disagree with Republicans on his show and still have a civil discussion, he's not praising their policies. He's praising the simple ability to talk to someone you don't like without it turning into chaos. That should be normal. But now, it's treated like some kind of radical stance. And maybe that's why the clash between him and someone like Kimmel resonates so much. Kimmel represents one style of late night now. Emotional, openly partisan, morally certain. He's predictable. Maher represents another lane. Critical, independent, willing to challenge his own side as well as the other. That unpredictability is uncomfortable in a world where loyalty is tribal. So here's the question for you. Do you think late night comedy got better or worse when it became political? Should comedians pick a side, or should they just make fun of everyone equally? And does the left really struggle more with internal disagreement than the right? Or is he just noticing what he wants to see? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Whether you love him or can't stand him, he's touching on something real. The culture has a choice. We can learn to disagree like adults again, or keep turning every difference of opinion into a cancellation event. And if that's the path we continue down, it won't just hurt comedy. It'll hurt the very act of conversation itself.